Prism, a glass object which refracts surfaces at an acute angle and separates white light into a spectrum of colors. I am not talking about that. I mean, this prism. Prism is an acronym for the program launched by the National Security Agency to collect and analyze massive volumes of private data stored on servers that are operated by internet service providers and held by large web companies including Microsoft, Yahoo, Google, Facebook, AOL, Skype, YouTube and Apple. What I am trying to discuss in this video is the effect of massive data surveillance on citizens, and if we could find a middle ground between citizen privacy and effective law enforcement. I will be using the example of the Prism program as I mentioned in the introduction to give you an overview of what that middle ground could be. Without further ado, let's go through it. If the history of surveillance programs teaches us anything, it's that the government can subvert seemingly clear legal standards and rules to move forward with surveillance activities. If we look back in history for 2 decades, you might see what I mean. Taking the United States as an example, mass surveillance of telephone metadata began as a component of the George W. Bush administration's terrorist surveillance program in the aftermath of the September 11 attacks. The terrorist surveillance program, also called the President's Surveillance Program and Stellar Wind, was based on a dubious interpretation of the executive power to wage the war on terror. Congress and the courts were entirely removed from the process of approving this system, nor were they notified when it went into effect. The executive branch of the United States government authorized a program through Section 215 of the USA Patriot Act of 2001, a program employed to collect domestic telephone metadata, that the data on who you call and receive calls from, when and how long they last. This occurred on a massive scale and skirted essential checks and balances. These programs have brought about unprecedented violation of Americans' privacy with little else to show for them. If you're wondering how this worked and why they employed it. Originally, mass collection of domestic telephone metadata took the form of bulk collection, in which the government swept up the full call records of every customer of America's biggest telephone companies, ostensibly so it could sift through the data and identify terrorism suspects based on call patterns. But this bulk collection was banned in 2015 as part of the USA Freedom Act, which enacted a number of significant surveillance reforms, with this ban being the most notable. Newly released information confirms that the program has come at a huge cost to privacy. A recent annual transparency report from the Office of the Director of National Intelligence revealed that the NSA collected telephone metadata on more than 19 million different phone numbers from late May 2018 until the end of the year. How come, you may ask? This is based on a simple collection of data. The NSA acquires all metadata about the target's incoming and outgoing calls in a stage called first hop, and all phone records of the people who contacted the target, second hop. Thus, under a single order, the NSA collects all the phone records of target and individuals, and some of the phone records of other individuals. Even without revealing the content of calls, the records of who you are calling, and when can reveal the most intimate details about your life. Handing those data over to the government risks abuse, and gives the government power to stockpile information about our most intimate activities and interactions. And collecting that data from people who aren't suspected of wrongdoing, as is the case with individuals in the first and second hops whose phone records are also collected, comes dangerously close to violating basic rights of privacy. How come, you may ask? This is based on a simple collection of data. The NSA acquires all metadata about the target's incoming and outgoing calls in a stage called first hop, and all phone records of the people who contacted the target, second hop. Thus, under a single order, the NSA collects all the phone records of target and individuals, and some of the phone records of other individuals. Even without revealing the content of calls, the records of who you are calling, and when can reveal the most intimate details about your life. Handing those data over to the government risks abuse, and gives the government power to stockpile information about our most intimate activities and interactions. And collecting that data from people who aren't suspected of wrongdoing, as is the case with individuals in the first and second hops whose phone records are also collected, comes dangerously close to violating basic rights of privacy. In addition to this enormous cost to privacy, the Call Detail Records program appears to have been a complete failure for intelligence collection. There is currently no public evidence the Call Detail Records program has provided any unique value to national security. Technical problems with the program resulted in the NSA ending up with data it didn't have the legal authority to possess, which in 2018 forced the NSA to purge all the call records it had collected since 2015. It reportedly later shut down the program entirely. In 2006, a USA Today report revealed details of the telephone metadata bulk collection program, which had been running alongside the email metadata program, sparking increased public scrutiny. In the face of public scrutiny, the government's legal rationale for the program was shredded. Finally, in June 2013, a private contractor working for Booz Allen Hamilton, by the name Edward Snowden, leaked classified presentation slides that detailed the existence and the operations of Prism. Both publications say that according to the slides, Prism is considered a highly classified program that allows the National Security Agency and Federal Bureau of Investigation to retrieve data directly from Microsoft, Yahoo, Google, Facebook, Paltalk, AOL, Skype, YouTube, and Apple, along with the widely used cloud service Dropbox. It has been reported that NSA documents have been obtained in which the agency states it accessed data from Apple iPhones, BlackBerry devices, and phones that use Google's Android operating system. The documents state that it is possible for the NSA to tap most sensitive data held on these smartphones, including contact lists, SMS traffic, notes, and information about where a user has been. One of the first arguments that emerged as a result of this leak was, "Why should I care about Prism? The government collects information about us to protect, they only use this information to catch the bad guys. So I don't mind." The most notable one being, "If you haven't done anything wrong, you have nothing to fear." This was a typical argument used by governments and other groups to justify their spying activities. What guarantees that the collected information will not be obtained by someone else? What are the guarantees that these stored databases will not get broken into? What if someone like Edward Snowden can leak information about you? Additionally, what is more worrisome is that the audits made at NSA are cursory, incomplete, and easily fooled by fake justifications, with numerous self-granted exceptions, and that NSA policies encourage staff to assume the benefit of the doubt in cases of uncertainty. This means that there can be a large number of false alarms, and anyone can suddenly become a dangerous suspect. Second, the current data collection activity of the U.S. government is not the most effective solution. According to many security experts, the information are overcollected, and the investigation are not focused at all. In the debate about privacy versus security, the security expert Bruce Schneier says, "There's plenty of examples of security that doesn't infringe on privacy. They are all around. The government feels like they need all this information in order to do their job, that there can't be security without them having access to everything. Well, that's a lazy or short-sighted way of seeing things." He further says, "The idea I reject is that you need to violate everyone's privacy rather than be better at your job of identifying specific targets. The point is that security and privacy are not mutually exclusive ideas." There are several states that use big data to stop fraud in government programs. Upon cursory inspection, it seems to make sense, as most people are law-abiding citizens. Most ostensibly will not be targeted for surveillance, and it will not impact their lives, while making their lives more comfortable and safer through the elimination of criminals. Thus, the government's use of closed-circuit television cameras in public spaces, warrantless wiretapping, and library record checks have the potential to save lives from criminals and terrorists with only minimal invasion of its citizens' privacy. If we are to take a hypothetical example, if we are to ask all citizens to carry location tracking devices, it would make tracing criminal acts much easier, and that it could easily be argued that people refusing to carry these devices only do so because they have something to hide. It is a matter of course that most people in our society would object to this solution, not because they wish to commit any wrongdoings, but because it is invasive and prone to abuse. Now consider that, given current technology, the government already has the ability to track a known target's movements to a reasonable degree, and has easy access to information such as one's purchasing habits, online activities, phone conversations, and mail. Though implementing mandatory location tracking devices for the whole population is certainly more invasive than the above, we argue these practices are extreme and equally unacceptable. Additionally, we never care to ask about trusted insiders. One example emerged in September of 2007 when Benjamin Robinson, a special agent of the Department of Commerce, was indicted for using a government database called the Treasury Enforcement Communications System (TECS) for tracking the travel patterns of an ex-girlfriend and her family. Records show that he used the system illegally at least 163 times before he was caught. With the expansion of surveillance, such abuses could become more numerous and more egregious as the amount of personal data collected increases. In addition, allowing surreptitious surveillance of one form, even limited in scope and for a particular contingency, encourages government to expand such surveillance programs in the future. A prominent example could be how the collection of biometric has expanded immensely in the past several years. Many schools in the UK collect fingerprints of children as young as 6 without parental consent, and fingerprinting in American schools has been widespread since the mid-80s. Now, the discussion has shifted towards DNA collection. British police are now pushing for the DNA collection of children who exhibit behavior indicating they may become criminals in later life. The former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani has encouraged the collection of DNA data of newborns. When data is collected, whether such data remains used for its stated purpose after its collection has been called into question, even by government officials. The European Data Protection Supervisor has acknowledged that even when two databases of information are created for specific and distinct purposes, in a phenomenon known as function creep, they could be combined with one another to form a third with a purpose for which the first two were not built. In conclusion, non-uniqueness and immutability of information provides great potential for abuse by individuals and institutions. Surveillance can be ethical, but there have to exist reasonable, publicly accessible records and accountability for those approving and performing the surveillance in question. We are undergoing a revolution in the way that information about our purchases, our conversations, our social networks, our movements, and even our physical identities are collected, stored, analyzed, and used. The immense volume, diversity, and potential value of data will have profound implications for privacy, the economy, and public policy. So, given all these facts, what will be your decision?